All right, I think we're going to finish part 4. This should be it for documents one. What am I hell? What was this? 101 to 150. Yeah, this should be the last one, part 4. Let's just get it done and give you my initial takes. I want to say this is the next one. Again, if you aren't familiar with what the hell I'm doing, you need to watch the videos before this. It'll explain everything, especially if you start with part 1. Brett Payne's report from 1/26/2023. This is receipt of Mingles. This is a bar, I believe, in Moscow, Idaho. And on 11/17, so this is after the murder by 4 days, some individual of Mingles Bar and Grill provided copies of all their credit card transactions from Mingles for November 12th, the day of the 12th. This person provided these copies to MPD reception and received a transcript. Now, I don't remember any of the girls being at Mingles that particular day, and so I'm curious if it wasn't one of the girls they're looking for, who are they looking for at Mingles? I don't know what the story is with that, because I don't remember the girls being at Mingles. Now, here's Rosendahl from 1/29/2023. This is related to the release of the dog from the shelter the day of the murders. So, on November 13th, 2022, at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever you want to say, or is that actually not 5 o'clock? 6 o'clock? Anyways, I was tasked with releasing a dog from the humane shelter to its owner, Jack DeCour. The dog had been transported earlier in the day from 1122 King Road residence to the Humane Society by LCSO Deputy Olson. I released the dog to DeCour without incident and gave him the impound paperwork to Captain Lanier. No body-worn camera. So I just thought it was interesting to note the tracking of Murphy into the possession of Jack DeCour, who I believe still has Murphy to this day. Now, Lawrence Mowry on January 30th, about the event that happened on the January 24th, well after, of course, Brian Koberger is now the major suspect, and this is an investigation into Brian Koberger. Now, on January 24th, 2023, I applied for a warrant for the user subscriber information and user data associated with the Tinder account of Brian Koberger with any of the following identifiers, and it's got stuff from Brian Koberger's addresses and stuff like that, including an email from, look at this, DeSales University, Brian Koberger. So later that day, I received a call from an individual from the customer service representative from Match, which is the owner of Tinder. That person informed me that they had located a previous account linked to the email that they gave them. However, no further information was available as the account was deleted. I requested any and all information available to the deleted account. In reviewing this contents, I found several unique identifiers, something associated with something email account. We're also associated with the phone number. And then there's a whole bunch of redacted stuff. Now, all I want to say about this is, one, it is odd to me. There are indicators that Brian Koberger wasn't dating, wasn't interested in dating. He was focused on school. And so him having a Tinder account seems odd in the first place. And again, if you're one that who wants to go down that narrative, that Brian Koberger, of course, was stalking the girls, then maybe he was stalking Kaylee on Tinder, because we know she has a Tinder account. But again, no information was obtained. And as they said, they really wanted to make a connection between Brian Koberger and the girls, but they could not make one, which means that they didn't find Dick on Tinder. Now, Lawrence Mowry also received on December 22nd, 22, he applied and was granted for a warrant for the subscriber information associated with the accounts that communicated Maddie Mogan's Tinder account. So now we know both Kaylee and Maddie used Tinder. Brian Koberger used Tinder. So can you say that the Brian Koberger found the girls on Tinder? Did he decide, and maybe there was no connection between, because that's the other thing you can say, again, playing devil's advocate, Brian Koberger could have used Tinder to look through girls and decided that he was interested in these girls, never reached out to them, never had any communications, and or deleted the account, and there was no trace, but there was no connection between Koberger and any of the victims. So did he, if he's what they say he is, did he find his targets on Tinder? But again, officially from the courtroom, there is no connection between Koberger and any of the victims, and they really wanted to make that connection. They couldn't. Brett Payne about the arrest warrant for Koberger. Now this This is a short one. Based on the information obtained during the course of this investigation, I applied for an arrest warrant for Brian Koberger with the magistrate Judge Marshall signed the warrant on 12/29/2022. Now, previous search warrants and information led investigators to believe Koberger left Pullman, Washington, and returned to his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. And Sergeant Gilbertson from the Idaho State Police, and this individual that goes redacted from the FBI, and I flew to Pennsylvania on 12/29 and met with the Pennsylvania State Police and FBI personnel. So they flew out there and arrested him the same day. At approximately 1 o'clock in the morning on 12/30, the PSP search team conducted an operation at the residence of Koberger's, his parents, and took Koberger into custody based off the warrant signed by Judge Marshall. Now, I will say, and I'm not going to beat the hell out of this, that again, the magistrate judge, whose job is basically just to do administrative type things like signing off on search warrants, was presented a PCA, a probable cause affidavit for Koberger's arrest, that was largely problematic, and the prosecution indicated that they knew that the PCA was largely problematic. Under exam and in the pretrial hearings, Ann Taylor made it clear that they had essentially fabricated information in the probable cause affidavit to arrest Brian Koberger. Their end result, and the one that Hitler went with, was they had enough information on Koberger. It doesn't matter that there was fake information or false information in the PCA. They would have got Brian Koberger an arrest warrant anyways, so it doesn't matter that it was full of crap and that they weren't planning on using the PCA in court because it was full of crap, because they would have got him anyways, is essentially the logic. Every step of the way, Hitler had decided Koberger was the guy and was going to go down, and it didn't matter whether they did things right, legally, whatever, and he wasn't going to tolerate any other person to be brought forward. No one is allowed to be guilty except for Brian Koberger, and that's the way that went down. Now, again, at the end of the day, I've talked to a criminal defense attorney who stated that, yes, law enforcement tends to get narrow-sighted when they decided who it is. However, most of the time, they probably end up being right. Would you want to live in a society where they were wrong most of the time and put the wrong people in jail? So I've had a criminal defense attorney tell me most of the time they're actually right. But does it mean that they get narrow-focused? Yes, they do get narrow-focused, and they decide that they're right, and then they move forward. And they're not always right. That's the problem. They're not always right. Now, Koberger was taken to a nearby PSP barracks where Sergeant Gilbertson, this is from the Pennsylvania State Police, I believe, where Sergeant Gilbertson and I interviewed him for approximately 45 minutes. Sergeant Gilbertson's report on the interview, see that for full details. And I'm sure that's coming up later in the documents. The warrant was served to Koberger upon his extradition back to Idaho and his booking into the Latah County Jail. And again, I want to say everybody who talked to Koberger when they arrested him and afterwards said that he was acting very normal. Nothing seemed abnormal. He didn't seem to be particularly concerned. He was even talking about going out for coffee with one of the officers. Is that a sign of autism spectrum disorder, that he just doesn't act properly? Or was it the actions of somebody who doesn't feel like they're going to be in trouble because they didn't do anything? Or is it a stone cold killer that just is cold as ice? Of course, it's the latter, if you like that narrative, because you just pick which one you want to go with. And if that's the narrative you got, that's the one you go with. He's a stone cold killer. So of course he didn't show any signs of emotion and acted like a normal person, because that's exactly what a stone cold killer would do. And I get it. Once you build a narrative, that's how it goes down. Now we're talking about Brett Payne on February 1st, talking about a Koberger information and cell phone search warrant. And this is a lengthy one, I think. Oh, fuck. Yeah, this is. So this, I think, ends up being, the source of the probable cause affidavit. This is all the information that leads to Koberger being the lead suspect. And I hesitate. We do have time to read it, so maybe I'll read it fast. But it's mostly just everything you've already heard before. I'm going to look. I don't. Again, this is the basis of the probable cause, including telling you at some point that it was observed that he didn't have his license plate. But again, what's not known is that during the pretrial hearings, Ann Taylor got the officer to admit that they didn't observe that the vehicle didn't have a license plate. They later wrote that on after they knew about Brian Koberger's name. They also expanded the years of the search once they knew Brian Koberger's car years and things like this. And again, that can be all debated 17 ways from Sunday. I feel like All right, let's just fucking read it. Let's just read it. Sorry, pardon my French. As part of the investigation, an extensive search, commonly referred to in law enforcement as a video canvass, was conducted in the area of the King Road residence. This video canvass was to obtain any footage from the early morning hours of November 13, 2022 in the area of King Road residence and surrounding neighborhoods in an effort to locate the suspect or suspect vehicle traveling to and leaving from the King Road residence. This video canvass resulted in the collection of numerous surveillance videos in the area from both residential and businesses addresses. I have reviewed numerous videos that were collected and have conversations with other MPD officers, ISP detectives, and federal FBI agents that were similarly reviewed footage that has been obtained. A review of the camera footage indicated that a white sedan, hereafter suspect vehicle 1, was observed traveling westbound in the such and such blank of Indian Hills Drive in Moscow at approximately 3:26 in the morning, and westbound on Snyder Avenue and Idaho State Highway 95 in Moscow at approximately 3:28 in the morning. On this video, it appeared suspect vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate, nor did it appear the vehicle had fog lights. That is bullshit. They later admitted they didn't observe that it had no front license plate. They wrote that in after they found out Koberger, and this was a living document, and it was revised after the fact. So that is not true. And at this point, it's revisionist history. You can call me a liar because that's what it says. It says they've always known it didn't have a front license plate. You would have to go and look hard enough into the documents of Ann Taylor examining officers on the stand where they admit that, yeah, they didn't actually observe the license plate. They wrote that in later, but it wasn't deceptive. It was just kind of like a clerical error. But you can either believe me or not. And again, if you want to believe a certain thing, you're not going to look. You don't care. And I get it. This is why I didn't want to even read this, because it's just full of some stuff that's just not right. So anyways, somebody located such and such. This was the video which captured suspect vehicle 1 crossing South Main Street from Steiner Avenue to Louder Avenue at approximately 3:28 in the morning. A review of the footage from multiple videos obtained from King Road neighbors showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20 in the morning. These sightings show suspect vehicle 1 makes an initial 3 passes by the 1122 King Road residence and then leave via Walenta Drive. Based off of any experience my experience as a patrol officer, this is a residential neighborhood and very limited number of vehicles that travel in the area during the early morning hours. Well, the problem with that is Molly was there, a tan car was there, a black SUV or dark SUV was there, and a light colored SUV. All was there around 4 o'clock in the morning. So, officer, you want to tell us this is a residential area with very low traffic, but there's at least 4 or 5 maybe cars in the area going around at that exact time. So it's a misleading statement to act like this is the only car there. That's what you're kind of like. This is it, man. There's nobody around. This just this car. There's a bunch of cars around that area at that time of the morning. And it may have been unusual for a bunch of cars around that time of the morning. And that may be exactly the point. If there was more than one person involved in this crime, how many cars arrived to the scene? Did people arrive from multiple locations? Was it a whole thing? Or does everybody just happen to randomly be out at 4 o'clock in the morning for no reason whatsoever? All right. Suspect vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04 a.m. It can be seen driving eastbound on King Road, stopping and turning around in front of the Queen Road residence, such and such place, and then driving back westbound on King Road. When suspect vehicle 1 is in front of the King Road residence, it appears to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. Now, again, I pointed out, and it's just recent observation, if the person was using GPS to find the 1122 King Road residence, we already know from Molly McMichael, the DoorDash driver, that she couldn't find the residence and had to drive around the neighborhood several times trying to find the residence because the GPS didn't take her to the right location. She couldn't find it. Is this vehicle doing exactly the same thing? Trying to find the 1122 King Road residence and pulling around, and it's got to be right here. I'm looking for it and pulling, is that all that's going on? Or is it a person stalking the girls and waiting for an opportunity? Depends on your narrative. The vehicle can be seen continuing on the intersection of Queen Road and King Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road. Now, suspect vehicle 1 is next seen departing the area of King Road at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. Suspect vehicle 1 is next observed traveling southbound on Walenta Drive. Based on my knowledge of this area and the review of camera footage in the neighborhood, that does not show suspect vehicle 1 during that time frame, I believe that the suspect vehicle 1 likely exited the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and Conesta Conestoga Drive. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Palouse River Drive is at the southern edge of Moscow and proceeds into Whitman County, Washington. Eventually, the road leads to Pullman, Washington. Pullman, Washington is approximately 10 miles from Moscow, Idaho. Both Pullman and Moscow are small college towns, and people commonly travel back and forth between the two of them. By the way, that's a statement I pointed out over and over again. Anybody who goes to school in Pullman goes to Moscow, Idaho, and vice versa. So the idea that they tried to paint in people's head, why the hell was a guy from Pullman, Washington, and WSU going to Moscow, Idaho in the first place? Did you know that he went in that area like 20-something times over the course of weeks? Well, yeah, everyone in that area mixes between those two college campuses. They touch each other. Intermingling in the two college campuses is what everyone does. It's what I did when I went there. All right. Law enforcement officers provided video footage of suspect vehicle 1 to forensic examiners with the Federal Bureau of Investigation that regularly utilize surveillance footage to identify the year, make, and model of an unknown vehicle that is observed by one or more cameras during commission of a criminal offense. The forensic examiner has approximately 35 years in law enforcement experience with 12 years in the FBI. His specific training includes identifying unique characteristics of vehicles, and he uses a database that gives visual clues of vehicles across states to identify differences between the vehicles. After re-examining the numerous observations of suspect vehicle 1, the forensics examiner initially believed that the suspect vehicle 1 was a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Upon further review, he indicated it could also be a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. As a result, investigators have been reviewing information on the persons in possession of a vehicle that is 2011, 2016, that whole big range. Now, again, there's a whole shitstorm about whether or not they were only looking for 2011 to 13 until they knew Koberger had a 16, and then they widened the range. And then there's other things that say, no, he immediately caught his error and said, you know what? Right after I said 2011 to 13, I'm more comfortable with 2011 to 2016. Whatever your case may be, there is arguments over when they expanded the search. And early on, we saw a report that said, well after the initial findings, they were still looking for a 2011 to 13 and even ruled out Koberger's car, I believe, because it was a 2016 and they weren't looking for a 2016 at the time. Later, I believe, when they found that Brian Koberger was the suspect, that the FBI said, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, this is your guy. They were like, oh, we know a 2016 Hyundai Elantra. That's the guy. So I don't know. Investigators were given access to video footage on the Washington State University campus located in Pullman, Washington. A review of that video indicated that approximately 2:53 a.m. on November 13th, a white sedan, which is consistent with the description of white Elantra known as suspect vehicle 1, was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street in Pullman towards SR 270. SR 270 connects Pullman, Washington to Moscow, Idaho. This camera footage from Pullman, Washington was provided to the same FBI forensic examiner. The forensic examiner identified the vehicle observed in Pullman, Washington as being a 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Now again, we know about a car accident in that area that had cameras on cars that were facing the same area that Brian Koberger supposedly would have driven, and it never was said yet whether or not they caught Brian Koberger on those cars, on those police cars as well. We'll see. At approximately 5:25 a.m., a white sedan, which was consistent with the description of suspect vehicle 1, was observed on 5 cameras in Pullman, Washington, and on WSU campus cameras. The first camera that recorded the white sedan was located at Johnson Road in Pullman. The white sedan was observed traveling northbound on Johnson Road. Johnson Road leads directly back to West Palouse River Drive in Moscow, which intersects with Conestoga, whatever the hell, Drive. The white sedan was then observed turning north on Bishop Boulevard and northeast on SR 270 at approximately 5:27 a.m. The white Elantra was observed on cameras traveling northbound on Stadium Way at Nevada Street, Stadium Way at Grimes Way, Stadium Drive at Wilson Road, and Stadium Way at Cougar Way. All right. So, by the way, I remember this area pretty well. I used to live there. But the point being is that a lot of this I wasn't going to read because it's just dry and it's boring and it's the stuff we all know already. It's not the meat. But I was like, I just want to make sure I just read through it one more time. I'll try to get this done in just a few minutes here. On November 25th, 2025, MPD asked area local law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra in the area. On November 29th, at approximately 12:28 in the morning, Washington State University police officer Daniel Tiengo queried white Elantras registered at WSU. As a result of that query, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate. This vehicle was registered to Brian Koberger, hereafter known as Koberger, residing at, and it has his address, Pullman, Washington. This location is approximately 3/4 of a mile from the intersection of Stadium Way and Cougar Way, the last camera location that picked up the white Elantra. That same day at approximately 12:58 a.m., WSU officer Curtis Whitman was looking for white Hyundai Elantras located a 2015 white Elantra at an address in Pullman in the parking lot. This is an apartment complex that houses WSU students. Officer Whitman also ran the car and it returned to Koberger with a Washington tag. Upon receipt of this information, I reviewed Koberger's Washington State driver's license information and photographed via driver's license query for that name. This license indicated that Koberger is a white male with a height of 6 foot and weighs 185 pounds. Additionally, the photograph of Koberger shows that he has bushy eyebrows, because that's what they said Dylan told them to look for, is the guy who was around 6 foot and had bushy eyebrows, so and medium build. So this is their guy. Koberger's physical appearance is consistent with the description of the male that Dylan Mortensen saw inside King Road's residence. Further investigation, including a review of Latah County Sheriff Deputy Corporal Duke's body cam and reports, show that on August 21st, Brian Koberger was detained as part of a traffic stop that occurred in Moscow by Corporal Duke. At that time, Koberger, who is the sole occupant, was driving a white 2015 Elantra with Pennsylvania plates, which was set to expire on November 30th. Now listen to this. His plates were set to expire November 30th. This is the part about narrative shaping that pisses me off, and I'm glad I decided to read it, if nothing else, for this sentence right here. Oh my God, did you hear Brian Koberger changed his plates to Washington plates? He was trying to disguise the fact that he had Pennsylvania plates. He knew he just committed a crime with Pennsylvania plates, and so he's quickly trying to change out his license plate because he's trying to disguise where he's from. Or his effing plates were set to expire November 30th, which was shortly after the murders, and he got his new plates and he put on his Washington plates because his plates had expired from Pennsylvania. Or that. Or yes, he's completely trying to cover up his crime because he knows they got him on Pennsylvania plates. He's got to quickly change out his plates to Washington State, or maybe he had expiring plates and it was time to change the plates. But this is how narrative shaping works. It makes him look super guilty, and everybody's jumped all over it. Oh, he's changing his plates, that motherfucker. He knew he was going to try to cover it up. Or his plates were expiring within weeks of the murder. During the stop, which was recorded via a law enforcement body camera, Koberger provided his phone number and he gave the number there, whereafter, this is known as the 8458 number, as his cell phone telephone number. Investigators conducted electronic database queries and learned that the 8458 number is a number issued by AT&T. All right. It's funny because you can almost get his entire phone number from that, couldn't you? You know he's from Pennsylvania. If his phone is registered in Pennsylvania and you know where in Pennsylvania he was, you probably have not only the area code, but you probably have the 3-digit extension for his area, and now you know the last 4 digits. Couldn't you just put his full number together? Anyways, I don't know. On October 14, 2022, Brian Koberger was detained as part of a traffic stop by a WSU police officer. Upon review of that body cam and reported the stop, Koberger was the sole occupant and was driving a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania plate. On November 18th, according to Washington State licensing, Koberger registered his 2015 white Elantra with Washington and later received a Washington plate. So on November 18th, this is days after the murder, Koberger registered his car with Washington and received a Washington plate. Why did he register his car with Washington? That sneaky bastard was trying to change his plates because they were about to expire. So here's the thing, people. Your narrative shaping has got some issues. Your argument is Brian Koberger never intended to come back. When he went to Pennsylvania, he was never coming back. If that's the case, why is Brian Koberger changing to Washington State plates? It looks to me like Brian Koberger is planning on coming back to Washington State. But no, your narrative is Brian Koberger left Washington State and he was never fucking planning on coming back. He changed his plate to disguise his murder so that they wouldn't catch his plates, and then never wanted to come back to Washington State, which is why he's going to take the effort to change his plates from Pennsylvania to Washington State. Like, your own narrative makes very little sense. Prior to this time, the 2015 white Elantra was registered in Pennsylvania, which does not require a front license plate to be displayed. This was learned through communications with Pennsylvania officer who is currently certified in the state of Pennsylvania. Based on my own experience and communicating with Washington State Washington law enforcement, I know that Idaho and Washington require front and back plates to be displayed. Now, where he's going with all that is because we saw and observed that the killer arrived in a car with no front license plate, and Pennsylvania doesn't need front license plates. It must be Koberger. But again, For F's sake. Under oath, it was admitted they did not observe that the car didn't have a front license plate, and it was only after they found out Brian Koberger didn't have a front license plate that they write in to the PCA that it didn't have a front license plate. And prove me I'm wrong. Prove me I'm wrong. And don't prove me I'm wrong by showing you this document that says that we observed he had no front license plate. I guess I'm the one that has the burden of proof. I got to go show you where Ann Taylor crossed or whatever and examined the officer and had him admit that they didn't see that he had no front license plate, that was written in after the fact. I guess I'm the one that's the burden of proof. So if you need it, I guess I'll have to find it for you. All right. Based on my own experience, okay, whatever, got that. Investigators believe that Koberger continued to drive the white Elantra as the vehicle was captured on December 13th by a license plate reader in Loma, Colorado. Koberger's Elantra was then queried on December 15th by law enforcement in Hannock County, Indiana. It was later learned this query was a result of a traffic stop in Hannock County, Indiana, whereas Koberger was the driver of the white Elantra and his father as the passenger. Koberger was stopped again 9 minutes later in Hannock County, or Hancock County. I keep saying Hancock County, and released without citation after further enforcement. On the 16th, at approximately 2:26 p.m., surveillance video obtained by the request of the FBI agents in Pennsylvania showed that Koberger's Elantra in Albertville, Pennsylvania. The only visible occupant of the vehicle was the white male whose description was consistent with Koberger. Koberger has family in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, learned through the TLO search and locating tool, namely, and this is the address, which is inside a gated community where footage was captured. Based on information provided on the WSU website, Koberger was a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. Pursuant to records provided by a number of interview panel for Pullman Police Department, we learned that the fall 2022 semester was Koberger's first semester at WSU. So he had just come out there and already had made friends, apparently, had people that were stopping by his place, all those things. Additionally, these same records indicate Koberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. So he specializes in cloud-based forensics. These records also showed Koberger wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with Pullman Police Department in the fall of 22. Koberger wrote an essay. In the essay, he had an intense interest in rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. Koberger also posted a Reddit survey, which can be found in an open source internet search. The survey asked for participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime, which they used that kind of logic to the magistrate to get a warrant for his arrest, saying this is the kind of guy. He wrote a survey about how you feel during commissions of a crime, and he has no license plate, which we kind of lied about. We observed that. Anyways, as part of this investigation, law enforcement obtained a search warrant to determine cellular devices that utilized cellular towers in close proximity to the King Road residence on November 13th between 3 o'clock in the morning and 5 a.m. After determining that Koberger was associated to both the 2015 white Elantra and the 8458 phone, investigators reviewed the search warrant returns. A query of the 8458 phone and these returns did not show the 8458 phone utilizing cell tower resources in close proximity to the King Road residence between 3 and 5 a.m. Listen to that. Go back on that, right? A query of the phone and those returns did not show the 8458 phone utilizing the cell tower resources in close proximity to the house between the time frame of the murders happened. Well, that's because he turned his phone off. That's the story, because he turned his phone off. I get it. But the point being is that, again, Bill Thompson said in court, we can't place Brian Koberger at the house. We can't place him in the house. We can say that his phone was near the house. I want to say how you even can say his phone was near the house when you're admitting in this document his phone didn't ping off the house. So how exactly do you put his phone at the house? Because that's what Bill Thompson basically said. We can't put Brian Koberger in the house, but we can put his phone near the house. How do you do that when you're saying here that his phone did not register in close proximity to the house? Just go ahead and pick your narrative. Pick whichever one looks good. That's one we go with. Based on my training, experience, and conversations with law enforcement that specialize in utilization of cellular telephone records as part of investigations, individuals can either leave their cellular telephone at a different location before committing a crime or turn their cellular phone off prior to going to a location to commit a crime. This is done by the subject in an effort to avoid alerting law enforcement that the cellular device associated with them was in a particular area where a crime is committed. So Brian Koberger, being a mastermind of criminology, who knew that he could get away with killing 4 people on 2 floors of a house and not leave anything behind except for the mistake, little tiny mistake that he made, and not track any of the victim's blood out to his car because he's a mastermind of criminology. Mastermind. Didn't think that it might be more important to leave his fucking cell phone behind when he goes to commit a quadruple homicide, or maybe not take his own car to the quadruple homicide past a bunch of cameras. He's not smart enough to do that. He's a mastermind to get away with murder, but he doesn't think that maybe he shouldn't take his car through past a bunch of cameras and take his cell phone to the crime scene. I just, that's me, and I've been saying it a million times. It doesn't make sense to me. But this officer wants you to know that that's exactly what a criminal would do. He'd turn his phone off, or he even says, or leave it at home. Wouldn't that have been about what does Koberger need his phone for? If he's going to commit murders, what does he need his phone for? Why not just leave that shit at home so he has an alibi? Wouldn't that be smarter if he's a mastermind? On December 23rd, what I'm going with that, I guess, let me make that, what I'm going with that is that if Koberger didn't suspect a crime was going to happen, let's say that he went somewhere, but he didn't expect a crime was going to happen, that might explain why you have your cell phone on you. If you know you're going to commit a crime, why not just leave your phone behind? Anyways, on December 23, 2022, I applied for and was granted a search warrant for historical phone records between November 12th and November 14th. By the phone held by the phone provider AT&T. It's so boring reading this. But anyways, all right, members of the cast are certified with FBI to provide expert testimony in their field of historical CSLI and are required to pass extensive training that includes both written and practical examinations prior to being certified with CAST, as well as the completion of yearly certification requirements. Additionally, the FBI CAST special agent that I consulted with has over 15 years of federal law enforcement experience, which includes 6 years with the FBI. This is too much for this video. The argument over the CAST data, over over Cy-Ray, the expert in cellular data, who said what the FBI said they got on the phone can't be possible. I know you're lying. I wrote the book on it. I wrote the software on it. That whole argument, I could sit there and go through and beat the hell out of it again. I've done so many videos on it. I don't want to do it again right now. It's not important. It would be such a long thing to explain all the details of the CAST data. And again, it's an argument that basically an expert who trained the FBI, and the FBI uses his software. Cy-Ray wrote the software the FBI is using to talk about that, said the FBI can't do what they said they did. He knows that they lied about it in the probable cause affidavit. But you guys don't care. And again, you guys, rhetorical, if you're watching this video, you do care. If you're one of those people that drive by and say, you're a piece of shit, you don't care. And so you're not going to hear it probably. Anyways. So on the November 13th at approximately 2:42 in the morning, his phone was utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to some location in Pullman. Hereafter, the Koberger, known as the Koberger residence. At approximately 2:47 a.m., the phone stops reporting to the network, which is consistent with either the phone being in an area without cell coverage, so he could have driven out of cell coverage range, and that happens a lot in that area, or the connection to the network is disabled, such as putting the phone in airplane mode, or the phone is turned off. Again, you build your narrative. Which one do you like? I like that he turned his phone off because I think he's guilty, so that's what he did. He turned his phone off because he was about to go commit murder. Or he was driving in the opposite direction and lost cell coverage because he was going to Wawaii Park. That was the defense's position. Now, I realize most of you do not buy the defense's position. I'm not even saying I buy the defense's position that he was going to Wawaii Park. I'm not even saying I buy it. But the point being is that when you find one of the scenarios that makes sense to you, that's the one you go with. Oh, he was going to commit murder. We know he was going to commit murder because he confessed to it. So therefore, what he did was he turned his phone off. But there are other options. And so when you're looking at alternative suspects or other reasons, you need to weigh all the options and relook at it. Is that what happened? Did he turn his phone off before going to the murders and decide to take his phone to a quadruple homicide and think he would get away with it, driving his own car? Or is there something else? Did he go there, maybe try to hide his whereabouts, but wasn't planning on committing a quadruple homicide? Like, I don't know. There's other scenarios. I just feel like I don't want to read the whole thing, but I'm doing it anyways. That's the thing. I don't even know if I want to post this one. At the 8458 number does not report to the network again until approximately 4:48 in the morning, at which time it utilizes cellular sources that provide coverage to Idaho State 95 highway on South Moscow, Idaho, near Blaine. Between 4:50 a.m. and 5:26 a.m., the phone utilizes cellular resources that are consistent with the 8458 number traveling south on Idaho State Highway 95 to Genesee. I did that before. Genesee, Idaho. Then traveling west towards Uniontown, Washington, and then north back into Pullman. At approximately 8:30 in the morning, the 8458 phone is utilizing resources that provide coverage to Pullman, Washington, and consistent with the phone traveling back to the Koberger restaurant. Residence. By the way, Cy Ray again and Ann Taylor again hinted that advanced timing records will come into play in this case. And advanced timing records are records that show pings of a phone and what direction of travel it's making. And what Ann Taylor said through her expert, Cy Ray, who again, I want to point out, I said I wasn't going to do this, and I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. Cy Ray has always testified as an expert on behalf of the prosecution in every single case of his entire career. Only one time in his entire career did he come out in behalf of a defendant, which was Brian Koberger, and said, what you guys are saying is incorrect. And he hinted that the advanced timing records will show Koberger was driving the opposite direction than where they say he was. But because there's no trial, we'll never get to see the evidence. Cy Ray will never be able to go to testify about what direction Koberger's car was going on, even though he wrote the book on it and wrote the software they were using and told us they're lying. Koberger wasn't going where they said he was going. But you know why it doesn't matter? Because there's no trial. So we don't need to worry about it. We're just not going to talk about it. Now, some people indicate maybe Cy Ray is going to come forward after the Koberger conviction and give the out, right? Koberger could not possibly have been. Here's the thing, people, and I'm just going to say this briefly. When Koberger took the guilty plea, when he took it, it established the facts. You went into the house at this time, you came out of the house at this time, and what you did in between there is you killed 4 people, and you were in that house. If somebody comes forward and proves Brian Koberger could not have been in the house at the time they said he was, then the deal is off, regardless of the whole no appeals thing. If he physically could not have done what they said he did, then he can't, plea or not, you can't be guilty of something it's impossible for you to have done. So if somebody comes forward and says Brian Koberger could not have been in the house at that time because he was over here going this direction and could not have possibly gotten back to the house in the time you say to do the murders you say, then that could make a difference. But I don't think we're going to go there, honestly. But that's one of the scenarios. Now, further review indicated that the phone utilized cellular resources on November 13th that are consistent with the phone leaving the area of the Koberger residence at 9 in the morning. So after he returned home, he left again at 9 a.m., traveling to Moscow, Idaho. Specifically, the 8458 number utilized cellular resources that would provide coverage to the King Road residence between 9:12 a.m. and 9:22 a.m. So he hit the tower that provides coverage to that house. It doesn't mean he was at the house. He hit the tower. Anywhere in Moscow, Idaho, pretty much is going to hit the tower that provides coverage to the house. It means nothing in itself. But I realize if your narrative is he's returning to the scene of the crime because he wants to get a hard on, showing how he's going back to his murder scene and seeing how things are going. Have they found the bodies yet? What's the crime scene look like? I want to see. I got to drive by. Or he just went to Moscow, Idaho and went to his bank. That, by the way, apparently is a thing, that he's on camera at his bank. But the narrative sounds better. He's going back to the crime scene to somehow get obsessed about seeing his own crime scene. So the 8458 phone next utilizes cellular services that are consistent with the phone traveling back to the area of Koberger's residence and arriving at the area at 9:32. So there is an argument to be made, and I believe it was documented that Koberger went to Moscow, Idaho, pulled money out from an ATM and went back to his apartment. But it sounds better to say no. What happened was he drove back to Moscow, pinged out the cell tower that services the house, and then went back home. He was driving past the crime scene to brag about it. Here's the best part about that. Everybody has all this grainy footage or whatever, not even necessarily grainy, all this infrared camera of a suspect vehicle 1, which might not even be the same vehicle, and we splice it all together. Proof that Koberger was there on a camera that you can't see. But you're saying now he went back during broad daylight to the house again? Where's that effing video footage? Where's that video footage of Brian Koberger going back to the house the next morning? It doesn't exist. So what you'll do is you'll play shell games with the data. Oh, well, he hit the tower that services the house that morning. Great. If you're implying, because you are implying, that he went back to the crime scene because he wants to see his handiwork or what's going on, that's what you're implying, and you know damn well that's what you're implying. Show us the video of him going back to the house, the daylight footage of Koberger going back to the house. You know why you don't have it? Because it didn't happen. He didn't go back to the house, just like he probably didn't go to the house all the other 23 times you said he pinged off the tower close to the house of the residents. But shell games, people, and people love it. They just eat it up. The story is he went back, and people will tell this for years to come. Oh yeah, Brian Koberger went back the next day to check on his crime scene. Really? If that's the case, I'll guarantee you would have seen that footage. I guarantee you, if Brian Koberger in a bright lit sunlight shot was back on that crime scene in front of the house, you would have seen the video. You haven't seen the video because it doesn't exist, because he didn't go there. But he did hit the cell tower just like all the other times, and he wasn't at the house. Please follow the logic. It has to make sense to you at some point. Now, again, I want to state one thing. I'm not saying Brian Koberger isn't involved. I'm not saying Brian Koberger didn't do the murders. He may have. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we are selectively picking what stuff we're going to focus on and play shell games with the data because we already know he did it. So we're only going to talk about those things that make it more convincing that he did it. Maybe he did do it. But you're cherry picking information and being careful with the way you word things to make it look like he's even more guilty, because there's a room of doubt there. There's a room of doubt, and you want to remove doubt by cherry picking the data and making it look like, oh, there's no question he did it. If there was no question he did it, we would have seen it in a trial, but there's not going to be a trial, which makes it even more questionable. If you follow what I'm saying. So, anyways, I don't even know. I keep saying I want to get through this. It's not finishing. It just keeps going on and on and on. And I can't, because I said we are going to get done in the fourth part, and we can't if we watch that. That's the longest fucking document ever. I think I might cut the whole thing out. Who knows? Brett Payne. I'm just lost. I lost steam. Brett Payne on February 1st, 2023, receipt of NDA and Lieutenant Mowry's, not Mowry, gosh darn it. I'm getting punch drunk and rummy. Receipt of NDAs and Lieutenant Mooney sup CD. Now, on January 31st, 2023, Lieutenant Mooney from Idaho State Police provided me with the original copies of the non-disclosure agreement made between ISP and Disaster Response, as well as a CD containing supplemental reports, photos of Kernodle's belongings. The only reason I bring this up is to say that there's a non-disclosure agreement for the disaster response, the people who were cleaning up the residents after the murders. That disaster response company that's cleaning up the murder scene has a non-disclosure agreement allowing them, or making it so they cannot talk about what happened at the 1122 King Road residence. What we don't know is how long does that non-disclosure agreement last, because even though documents are going to be unsealed in this case and apparently redacted still, but unsealed in the case, if there's a non-disclosure agreement between ISP and the disaster company, that non-disclosure agreement might be forever. They might be like, you are never allowed to talk about what you saw in the house, ever. So sure, you can lift the gag order and people will be allowed to talk about it, but the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement, would trump that, in my opinion. There's an NDA between the police department and the disaster relief where they may never be able to tell you what was in the house or what they found during the cleanup of the house, because they have a non-disclosure agreement. And I don't know when that non-disclosure agreement ends. So I just wanted to point that out. Here's Lawrence Mowry on February 1st. On January 24th, I applied for a warrant for the user subscriber information and user data associated with Yik Yak account for Brian Koberger. And in review of the contents, you found some information, but there was nothing of note. And again, keep in mind, we can't tie Brian Koberger to any of the girls, so there wasn't anything there to be found. Lawrence Mowry, 225, applied for a warrant for information on user data for a Dropbox account to Brian Koberger. Now, this gets a little interesting. This part I get a little interesting. And I'm going to end on this, I think, because even though there's more documents, I'm going to end on this. On January 24th, he applied for a warrant for a Dropbox. In the Dropbox, reviewing the data showed the account belonged to Brian Koberger with an address of whatever at DeSales. So this Dropbox was created for him when he was a student of DeSales. In reviewing the data, it showed an account that belonged to Koberger with an email address of DeSales, and there was 3 files in the account. 2 appear to be associated with using the Dropbox service, so it's just generic, hey, welcome to Dropbox kind of shit. And the third was an MP4 file titled Kids for Cash. Oh my God, he's a pedo. That's where people are going to go immediately. No, Kids for Cash is a documentary, and it's super interesting. This appears to be a movie released in 2013 from IMDb and provides and reviewed on IMDb, provides the following about this movie. Kids for Cash is a riveting look behind notorious judicial scandal that rocked the nation. Beyond the millions paid and high-stakes corruption, Kids for Cash exposes a shocking American secret. In the wake of the shootings of Columbine, a small town celebrates a charismatic judge who is hell-bent on keeping kids in line until one parent dares to question the motives behind this brand of justice. The real-life thriller reveals the untold stories of masterminds at the center of the scandal and the chilling aftermath of the lives destroyed in the process of the stunning emotional roller coaster. Let me pull this information up. I want to show it to you on screen about this in particular. Here's a detailed review of the documentary Kids for Cash. Kids for Cash stylized as cash with a $sign. And there's the director and blah, blah, blah. Synopsis. The film explores the 2008 Kids for Cash scandal in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, where Kohberger is from, Pennsylvania, where two judges, Michael Conahan and Mark Caravella, accepted kickbacks from private juvenile detention centers in exchange for harsh sentencings of juveniles for minor infractions, shoplifting, DVD, MySpace, jokes, and trespassing. Jokes, even. So two judges were throwing kids in jail because they were getting kickbacks from the juvenile detention center, and getting paid for send us more customers, arrest more kids, convict more kids, send us more kids. We'll pay handsomely, thank you very much, because it's good money to imprison kids. Let's imprison kids together. Ultimately, these two judges go to jail, one for 17 and a half years in prison, the other one for 28 years in prison. Both of them sentenced for a conspiracy of convicting children that weren't guilty of anything, harsh sentences, and sending them to detention centers so they can get a financial kickback for sending people to jail. These judges went to prison for falsely convicting people, and convictions of children were overturned because of these corrupt judges. And the last thing I want to point out to you is just a point that corrupt judges exist, and sometimes, thank God, corrupt judges will go to jail. These corrupt judges went to jail. Brian Kohberger's interest in Cash for Kids, maybe because he was in Pennsylvania, maybe because the teacher or whatever he was under at the time in DeSales University mentioned this case and he was interested and wanted to know more about it. That wouldn't be a big deal. There's nothing creepy about Brian Kohberger, a criminology student, looking into a crime about judicial misconduct, two judges that are making money sending kids to jail for nothing. Brian Kohberger had a run-in with the law when he was younger as a kid, and so maybe he had a super interest. Nothing creepy about it whatsoever, but it's a great thing to end on. Judges commit crimes. Judges get paid off. Judges have financial incentive. These judges were making money sending children to jail for harsh sentences that didn't deserve it, and they ended up getting all kinds of stuff overturned. How many of those children were convicted for things they didn't even do? Telling jokes on MySpace. Bad joke. We're sending your ass to a detention center. You told a bad joke on MySpace. How many kids were wrongfully imprisoned? Well, a lot got overturned, and these judges went to jail, and it's a great sobering thought. Judges get corrupt. Judges get paid off. Judges sometimes go to jail. Hey, it's me again. Now, I have a slightly different shirt on than I had last time because this is being recorded. This last part of this video, part 4, which is running long, is getting recorded after I kind of shut down at the end of my last recording. The reason I shut down is because I was reading that long document that basically was the formation of the PCA, and I am not really all that great at reading fiction. So that was a lot of fiction, and I was reading it. I was like, oh my God, we've poured through this document for so many years that I was starting to get in the middle of reading the long thing. I realized I was losing steam. I was losing interest. We've heard it a million times. I'm getting tired of ranting about the same exact thing over and over again. And so I kind of like right in the middle of that recording on the fly, I was like, I'm going to shut this document down. And then I couldn't get my groove back. Stella did not get her groove back when I went back and I did the next couple of documents, and I ended on the Cash for Kids thing and was saying goodnight. And then I decided, okay, look, I only have like 7 more documents to go through, and they're not even really all that big ones, and I want to finish this video because there's probably some good stuff earlier on. So this is a recording at the end that I did the day after to try to finish that shit up. And if it felt like I was losing steam at the end, I don't even know if you made it that far. It probably was that I was losing steam at the end. So let's finish up real quick, and I'm going to put this on screen so that we can finish this document review of the documents 151 through what is it, 101 to 150, I think, is what we're doing right now. Either way, I got to get this on screen for you, and we're going to continue with the read of these documents. So here we go. Now, I'm going to blow this up. This is Dustin Blaker, February 2nd, 2023. On February 2nd, 2023, at around 8 in the morning, Corporal Brett Payne and myself responded to the secure storage area of the city shop to take photos of property belonging to, and I believe that's Dylan Mortensen, and another unidentified female. MPD had previously removed items belonging to, I think that's going to say Dylan, Bethany, Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee. Items had also been removed from the spare bedroom from the first floor. That's the one that they refer to sometimes as an office or Ashlyn Couch's old room. Now, Ann Taylor, defense counsel, was granted permission to go through these boxes to see what could be released back to the proper owners. Prior to Ms. Taylor being given a chance to look at these items, property belonging to Xana, Maddie, and Kylie already had been released. That's part of the problem, by the way, in this case. And it's not a huge one, but it is part of the problem. Ann Taylor should have had the ability to go through this before they started releasing information back to the families. Because again, if you believe in any kind of cover-up or whatever, them getting rid of evidence before the defense attorney has a chance to look at it is a no-no. So anyways, this is just pointing out that they did release some items back to the family members before Ann Taylor, the defense attorney for Brian Koberger, comes in and takes a look at what they grabbed. MPD, Moscow Police Department, had also given Dylan back her belongings, but were able to get her to return them. Now, again, earlier I was stating, is Dylan Mortensen married? It talked about Dylan Mortensen and her husband. I haven't seen anything online about Dylan Mortensen getting married. And if she did get married, it seems like she got married right after the murders. That part is still a mystery to me. Does anybody know the answer to that? Because it just seemed like it said Dylan and her husband. Anyways, Ms. Taylor requested that we set aside the following items. Now, this is super interesting to me. Look at the items that they got, and I believe, does it say who specifically it was from? Because the set of, this is her going through stuff, but in the items belonging to Dylan, yes, from Dylan, that's what I thought. These are items from Dylan. Some of the stuff that got returned or was in the original were not clear. But amongst them is a black and white Vans shoe. That's interesting, because did they not say that there was a latent shoe print that would look like it was a Vans shoe print? I thought that was the case, that it was a Vans shoe print. So if Dylan has a pair of Vans, and if Dylan has bigger feet, because if Dylan is a tall girl and she has bigger feet, is the large shoe print really the killer's that was left behind, or was Dylan wearing Vans and left a spot herself in the crime scene that was a latent shoe print? That's a good question to me. I'm not implying that. I'm just saying it's interesting because I remember there being a thing about a Vans shoe, and there was a red and white unknown brand shoe and a black and white Converse shoe. So there's several shoes that Ann Taylor in particular. Look, Ann Taylor requested to set aside those items. She's interested, Ann Taylor, in the shoes. Why is Ann Taylor into shoes? Is she just into shoes and thinks, oh, you know what, Dylan and I wear the same size shoe. Maybe at the end of this trial, I could just take Dylan's shoes. No, Ann Taylor is interested in Dylan's shoes because I think Ann Taylor suspects there's something suspicious. Could some of the footprints, latent footprints, be Dylan's own feet herself? So the above items were placed in a cardboard box and set aside until Ms. Taylor can get a court order stating that she can take the items. So she's interested in these things. She sees it and she's, hey, I want to take a better look at those shoes. Let me get a court order so I can go through those shoes. Now, I find that interesting. Jason House from February 7th, 2023. On February 2nd, at approximately 1700 hours, I responded to a single vehicle crash at 500 Queen Road. While parked in the parking lot of Queen Road, directly above the 1122 King Road crime scene, some person with an M and a P and an A and an F were attempting to push some person's car. So this is M and P, whoever that person is. They were trying to push that person's silver Nissan Versa off of a frozen patch of the lot. While attempting to push the vehicle, it rolled forward off the patch of ice and down the embankment, crossing past the crime scene tape, I'm presuming at 1122 King Road residence, and striking a tree on the property, I believe, of 1122 King Road residence, approximately 20 feet from the house. This person, P, stated that he crossed the crime scene tape and placed his car in park, then turned off the engine. That person with the name of P explained that he did not go past the vehicle near the home. Now, why is this important? Let's finish the sentence. I think there's only one more sentence. This person or something came and removed the vehicle while officers were on the scene. No one left past the front of the vehicle or approached. So the point being is that here's why we're documenting it. We're documenting it because we're trying to maintain chain of custody on the house. So of course, chain of custody being a yellow piece of police tape, boy, nobody could cross that. That's a super barrier. The point being is that when a car rolls through the police tape and hits a tree on the property, and then some unknown person enters essentially the crime scene to get their car turned off or whatever the case may be, that interjects that now we have to document this, because if a footprint shows up from that person at the scene, on the crime scene, I don't want anybody saying or having any confusion about, hey, maybe this is the killer's footprint we just didn't see in this, and oh, we need to document this person came into the scene on this day. Could that footprint have been left? So it's all part of making sure that this person doesn't get their ass hung later on when their footprint shows up at the door or on the crime scene. So now we're going to look at Brett Payne. I just found it interesting, that's all. It's worth noting about. Now, Brett Payne on February 10th, release of Chapin's vehicles. So they took vehicles from the victims out front. I don't even know why I highlighted that. That shouldn't have been all that important piece. Let's go to Brett Payne on February 10th, 2023. Collection of Gonzalez's Apple Watch. This is interesting. From G. And who was G? I think G... Was G the family? Yeah, G is the attorney. Shannon, I forgot the last name. I think it's Gray. I think it's Shannon Gray, attorney for the Gonzalez family. I think that's who it is. Yeah, I think so. Again, I might have the name a little bit wrong. I'm not going to double check it right now. This is kind of raw. This is raw video, so I can get a lot of things wrong, and I'm trying to let you know this is raw. I've done 9 hours of videos just on the first 150 documents, right? So I know somebody out there recently said, side tangent, somebody recently said, you probably should read all the documents before you comment on it, because you're going to lead people astray by talking about things that get answered later on. Well, actually, no, I disagree. And the only reason I disagree is because, let's say this Jack Showalter situation, that's what they use. What if you find out later on document 375 that all the blood in Jack Showalter's house is animal blood? You would look like a jerk going off and leading people astray that Jack Showalter has some big suspicion when they answer it later. Now, first of all, I expect police to answer things later, especially if they want to exclude a person. So if, for example, they want to exclude Jack, and then they would come up with a way to exclude him that may or may not be legit. So let's keep in mind with the Showalter thing in particular, they were supposedly testing the door for human blood to get access to the house, so it's probably not animal blood or whatever the case may be. But either so, the narrative and how it developed is important. So reading earlier documents, even if we find out later on they changed facts and said, you know what, it's kind of like the PCA. The PCA, which we read, talking about how they observed the vehicle with no front license plate, was something they wrote in later. They wrote that in. And in that case, we had to figure it out because we watched a later court document where Ann Taylor said, hey, by the way, you really didn't observe it without a license plate, did you? Right? So we have to follow the trail. And sometimes you want to see what they said at one point and then what they said later, and then explain how that discrepancy happened. That's all part of the story. All right. On February 9th, I was notified by somebody, SS. So I think that's Shannon Gray. I think that's the name, the attorney for the Gonzalez family that they hired to represent their interest. Representatives of so it's SG, a representative of the Gonzalez family, that he discovered an Apple Watch and Kaylee's belongings, which had been released to the Gonzalez family on December 12th, a month after the killings. This person, Gray, I think it is, stated that he took a video of himself removing the watch from the box. I told Gray that NPD would take custody of the watch as it could be helpful to the investigation. Gray brought the Apple Watch to me at the Moscow Police Department later on February 8th. I had Gray sign the chain of custody sticker and provide him with my business card on the back, of which were instructions to send me the video of his discovery of the watch. I booked the Apple Watch into MPD evidence upon ending our conversation. I'm going to finish this because I want to point out what just happened here. I have since sent 2 emails requesting that Gray for the video of him locating the watch. As of this writing, I have not received any images or videos of Gray finding the watch. In addition, I spoke to several members of ISP and MPD who boxed up Kaylee's belongings, none whom remember seeing this item. So, why is this important? Because an attorney for the Gonzalez family is able to take items related to the crime scene, an Apple Watch, and take it away from the crime scene, and then when caught saying, "Hey, you took this Apple Watch in the crime scene. We still need to look at that thing." He says, "Oh, yeah, I'll return it to you." And they're like, "Well, what happened in between?" "Well, I took video of myself taking the watch." "Okay, I need to get that video of you taking the watch. I want to see when you first saw the watch, and I want that video showing when you took the watch." "Yeah, I'll send that to you." And then, according to this, at this time, so it was December. Anyways, at the time that they took the watch, it was December. What, it was a month after the murders. But the point being is that to the day that the officer wrote this report, that attorney had never given them the videos he said he was going to give, showing him taking the property from the crime scene evidence. So not a big deal, not a super big deal, but again, it's sus. Why is the attorney for the Gonzalez's taking items from the crime scene and then not showing the video of him doing so? What happened to that watch? That's all part of the story. If the watch ever becomes important to the case, we would have to then explain why the hell the Gonzalez family had that watch. And again, this is a raw look at the documents. In my mind, I'm going to be filing this away. This is how I work. So I'm going, oh wow, there's some shit. I remember there's some shit around this Apple Watch. If later on in documents we find out some critical piece of this this story becomes, Kaylee was wearing an Apple Watch during the murder, and and the knife hit it and did something special, and I'll be like, wait a minute. Wasn't there talk about the Apple Watch earlier? It's just filing away in the memory banks. You should do the same thing. When something raises your suspicion, you'd like, okay, I don't know if I have an answer, but we're not going to pay attention. Let's finish the documents for fuck's sake. All right. So this is from February 15th. About an incident on January 24th. January 24th, 2023, I applied for a warrant for the user information associated with a Twitter account for Brian Kohberger with the following identification. In reviewing the contents, I found the following data, and that's just it. I'm just pointing out that they're going after social media accounts related to Kohberger. The important part for this is, again, over and over again, they stated, we really wanted to make a connection between Kohberger and the girls, and we couldn't. So for those of you who think all of these apps was how he was contacting the girls, finding the girls, if they even had proof that he was looking at the girls' photos, they'd be like, here it is, here's the smoking gun. Kohberger was following her on Twitter, or was watching the photos on Twitter. They couldn't even get to that, so just keep that in mind. Lawrence Mowry on February 15th, new document here, created in error. Warrant return for the AT&T phone, such and such number, was previously returned by Corporal Brett Payne. I'm not sure what this means. Created in error. Warrant return for a certain phone was previously returned by Brett Payne. Super weird. Anyways. Only a few more documents, and then we are out. We can finish this, put a bow on it. Hope it's not boring the fuck out of you. Brett Payne, February 16, victim families to records. So, on or about January 6, FBI analyst, somebody, provided me a file for each of the 4 victims. The files contain background information on the victims from the University of Idaho. The information was obtained by request. During the early days of the investigation, I maintained the files in a locked file cabinet. On February 16th, 2023, I turned the originals over to the MPD records clerk, a certain person by a name that we don't need to know, in order for the files to be scanned and attached to the case. So just letting you know, for those people who might want to look down the rabbit hole, that there are files of the students. Again, not necessarily important. I'm just highlighting the parts of these documents that are interesting to me. They're not necessarily big things. I just want to point out what I'm interested in. All right, Brett Payne on February 17th. And this is a JM follow-up. I'm trying to remember who JM is in this case. So on February 16, 2023, I was notified by Sergeant Blaker that JM, whoever that is, had called requesting follow-up on a tip he provided during the investigation. Sergeant Blaker provided me with the phone number of something, and I called that person at that number and spoke to him. The conversation was not recorded. So this is a person who called in a tip and wanted to know how the police have dealt with that tip. By the way, that happens all the time. I have called in tips before. I'm curious to know if that tip helped at all, because I, as a citizen, want to know that I made a difference. Was I just wasting the officer's time on a worthless tip? I'd like to know that so I can stop calling in worthless tips. Now, granted, officers might say, never worry about calling in a worthless tip. We want all tips because you don't know what's going to be worthless or not. That's just the point. We as citizens, if we take the time to call you with a tip, we want to know how it turned out. We want to feel like we did something. We want to feel like we helped. We don't want to find out that every single time we call you, it's a waste of your time. And in the background, you're going, fuck, that guy called in another tip. You know, we want to know, are we wasting our time or not? Anyways, side rant. All right. Now, this person started by stating he lived at some residence in Moscow and had called in a tip early on in the investigation about seeing a vehicle drive by his house at approximately 4:25 in the morning to 4:30 in the morning of November 13th. This person told me he was out in front of his house and at that time placing items into his recycling and trash bins. This person stated he was wearing a headlamp at the time because it was dark and his front house lights were not on. This person stated there was only one street light in the area at the corner of his property. This person stated that he had been in and out of the house several times. On the last of these times, he told me that he heard a vehicle approaching his house from the north Conestoga, whatever drive. Now, I want to point out, again, I don't remember reading about this particular incident. We're reading about it for the first time when he calls up to follow up on a tip. Now, granted, they've had thousands. They said they've had thousands of tips. So a lot of tips didn't make it in. But this one raises now to the point of interest because somebody's calling back about what happened to the tip I gave you. And by the way, it's another effing vehicle driving around the neighborhood in this early morning hours in which they told us this is highly unlikely for people to be driving around at this time in the morning. That's part of the reason why they find out white Elantra is so suspicious. It's 4 in the morning. There's not a lot of cars in this area. Yet we've already seen several cars in this area. And here's another one, I believe. So this person was adamant that he could not swear to what type of vehicle he saw. However, he remembered seeing the headlights and taillights. He described the taillights as being teardrop shaped and about waist high. The only thing that he remembered about the headlights was that they were lower to the ground than the taillights. He also, or he or she, I think it's he, also told me the vehicle was going faster than usual, but did not seem to be driving erratically or dangerously. This person also told me that he thought at the time, it is a he, that the vehicle may have been a dark SUV, but based on the he based this only off the taillight, headlight, and the fact that he could not see the vehicle itself due to the lighting. So he thinks it's a dark SUV. I asked this person if it was common for him to be out that early in the morning. He stated that he often walked his service dog or took his trash out at that time. He told me that it was quite unusual for anyone to be driving in the area at that time. Again, cops say it's unusual. He says it's unusual. There's a lot of cars in this early morning scene that seem to be unusual, and that itself is unusual. Why is there so much activity in the neighborhood at this time of morning when everybody agrees it's unusual for this much activity? Which, again, why am I bringing it up? Because if it's a lone killer, why did he pick this house, especially if there's so much activity around this area? Or is it possible there are multiple suspects and multiple cars or multiple people arriving at the scene because it's something else is going on? That's the question. Is something else going on that explains all the activity around the house at this weird time in the morning? All right. So he told me it was quite unusual for anyone to be driving in that area at that time, and said he had not seen many cars driving in at that time in the morning. Then he told me that he spoke to an ISP, and it's Idaho State Police investigator, during the investigation, and told the investigator that he thought the vehicle might have been a dark SUV based on the above information. However, this person told me that he had since tried to tell the color of other vehicles driving by the house when it was dark outside, and he was been able to tell what color the vehicles were because of poor lighting. So in other words, the police are noting in the document that this guy said it was a dark SUV. Maybe they know that's going to cause problems with the story about the white Elantra, and so they're gonna correct. Well, he actually stated that he looked at other vehicles and he couldn't tell what color they were. So you can't say it was a dark SUV. So let's get the idea out of your head that there was another car in the area. It could have been the white Elantra for all you know. So anyways, he stated he was contacted by someone from Kootenai County Public Defender's Office who asked about the dark SUV he caught on security camera. And so he told me that he did not have video footage, nor was he certain the vehicle was an SUV or a sedan. He expressed several times that the only thing he could attest to was the shape of the taillights he saw. So it's interesting because this individual might be placing a different car that's racing away at a high rate of speed. So they're looking into it. He's like, hey, I don't know if it's not a sedan even. So it could be your suspect vehicle one that I saw. Whatever. Okay, it's just a point of interest. Now we got 2 more documents and we are out. Lawrence, and it may not even be big ones. Lawrence Mowry, 2/20/2023, about an event that happened January 24. So this is a good amount of time after the murders. On January 24, 2023, I applied for a warrant for the subscriber information and user data associated with the Twitter account for Brian Koberger and any of the following identifier. Oh, sorry for the yawn. It's early in the morning for me. And then I examined the Google Play library associated with the account and located the following. There was a Hinge dating app, Meet People, acquisition, Bumble dating app and for friends and an acquisition date. And examining this email content associated with the Gmail account, I found emails referencing a Twitch account with the username of something that we don't get to know. I also located emails associated with a YouTube account using a Gmail account that referenced and something we don't get to know. And the point behind all this is it's interesting to me, again, because we have stories coming out that have been pretty well documented that Brian Koberger didn't have time for dating, and yet he's got dating apps on his phone. So again, if you believe in the narrative that he did it, then is he looking for potential victims by using dating apps to see what kind of little sluts are out there that deserve to die because they're out there trying to hook up with guys? That is a possibility. That is a possibility. If the killer is your traditional stereotypical killer who seems to like pick on prostitutes, but they're not prostitutes at the campus, he's just looking for promiscuous girls because maybe he's got a problem. Like, these bitches are sleeping around and I'm not getting any, so I'm pissed. And it could be. But again, one more time for the peanut gallery. We really wanted to make a connection between Brian Koberger and anybody in the house, and we couldn't. So they couldn't ultimately conclude that Brian Koberger was picking victims off of dating apps. So, but that's what I think they're looking to see if they can prove that. And I think the answer was no, they could not prove it. So on last couple documents, Roger Lanier, 2/21, and this is about an incident on February 21, the release of crime scene residents. They're releasing the crime scene and residents at 1022. Now I have to wonder if this is a typo or not, because listen, on February 21, 2022, I received a copy of an agreement between the University of Idaho and the owner of the residence at 1022 King Road for the University of Idaho to take over security and remediation of the house. This was done after this crime scene was released by Judge Marshall's order and in accordance with the team Idaho Property Management, the property owner's attorney, University of Idaho Moscow Police Department. All responsibility to maintain and remediate the property was taken over by the University of Idaho. Now, I have to guess, I don't know anything about 1022 King Road residence being a crime scene, so I have to guess this is a mistake. We really are talking about 1122 King Road residence. We're talking about how the house was released to the University of Idaho for remediation, which means do what you're going to do with that house. And ultimately what they finally decided to do was tear the house down. And I think that's part of the narrative, that the house somehow was sold over to the University of Idaho and that the University of Idaho decided to tear it down. That's the remediation. So is this a typo? 1022 King Road or 1022, or is there another crime scene we don't know about? 1022, they typed it twice. And as some people pointed out, aren't police reports signed off by more than one officer? Did everyone miss the typo? Is it a typo or is there another crime scene? I'm guessing it's a typo. But is it weird? Yeah. And we're going to end on this last document right here. Dustin Blaker, 2/22/2023, the plates from Ames for FBI techs working license plate. A few weeks after November 13th, this is after the murders, I was at work when I was asked by MT, an analyst with the FBI, if we had a way to run our records to see if any license plates for a white Hyundai Elantra 2011 through 13, again, Koberger's car is outside of that range. They were looking for a 2011 through a 2013. I was able to run all the vehicles through Spillman, which is their database, I believe. I think it's their database. And I had DE, a person, parking enforcement officer, that's who it was, to run vehicles through Ames, another system. Ames is our parking ticket software. They tell you what it was. So that person that was running through those things through provided me with a printout of the plates, and I handed it to this expert who's doing analysis on license plates. So it could be provided to the FBI techs who are checking plates and looking for leads. Again, I pointed out because once more, they're looking for a 2011, and let's look at the date again on this, 2011 through 2013. Now, what bothers me about this is a lot of people point out, oh, well, yes, they immediately. So when they made the mistake, when they made a mistake in email and said, they're looking for a 2013 or 11 through 13 Elantra, and they realized that it was a mistake. They immediately said, you know what, I feel more comfortable looking for years through 2016, which was convenient because that's Koberger's car was outside of the 2011 to through 2013. It had to be like a 2015. So they had to up the range. Some say that's revisionist history. Oh, we're looking for a 2011 to 2013 because of a seasoned vet who had a lot of experience and said that car is a 2011 to 2013. Oh shit, our suspect is Brian Koberger. He doesn't have a vehicle. Let's broaden the range to include his vehicle. Oh yeah, we're looking for cars including his vehicle. Convenient. Now, people have said, oh, they immediately corrected that. Well, the problem is that this document is from 2/22. Is it revisionist history? Saying that they, even weeks after, not immediately saying, hey, you know what, I immediately thought about it and I want to broaden that range. Not immediately, but a few weeks after, they're still looking for this 2011 through 2013 plates, not a 2015 plate, as Koberger's car was later identified being outside the range of 2011, 2013. That is it for now. I know that's a lot. I got to edit this now and splice out some area where I lost my steam. This was long and boring. And so I realized that it's difficult. It's a deep dive. It's a long form video, and it's raw, and it shows. Have a good day.